Every generation faces a moment where someone must rise. Someone who refuses to bow to brokenness. Someone who looks at ruins and sees a future. Today, we step into the story of such a man, Nehemiah. A simple cupbearer in a foreign land, yet carrying a divine burden. This is not just history, it is a blueprint for rebuilding your life, your destiny, and your faith. In the Persian citadel of Susa, Nehemiah lived far from home, faithfully serving King Artaxerxes. But one ordinary day changed everything. Messengers arrived from Judah with a devastating report. The walls of Jerusalem lay in ruins, the gates burned, and the people vulnerable and ashamed. The moment Nehemiah heard it, his heart broke. He wasn't grieving over stones. He was grieving over a fallen identity, his people living without protection, without dignity, without hope. Nehemiah didn't rush into action. He fell to his knees. For days he wept, fasted, and prayed. He confessed the sins of Israel, reminded God of his covenant, and begged for mercy and favor. Before he ever touched the ruins, he touched heaven. That is where every true rebuilding begins. Months later, while serving wine to the king, Nehemiah's sorrow finally slipped through his controlled expression. Sadness in the presence of royalty was dangerous, but the king noticed. "Why is your face sad?" he asked. Nehemiah's heart pounded, but he spoke boldly. Jerusalem was destroyed, and he longed to rebuild it. In that moment, God moved. The king granted permission, authority, letters, protection, and resources. When God grants favor, human power becomes a tool in divine hands. After a long journey, Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem silently, no announcements, no trumpet blasts. For 3 days he observed, listened, prayed. Then, under the cover of night, he mounted his horse and inspected the ruined walls. Burned gates, fallen stones, deep gaps. He studied every wound the city carried. Why at night? Because vision is born in silence. Before you rebuild anything publicly, you must see it clearly in private. When the sun rose, Nehemiah gathered the leaders and declared, "You see the trouble we are in. Come, let us rebuild the wall." His conviction ignited their spirits. Hope, long buried, came alive again. And the people answered with one voice, "Let us rise up and build." Destiny begins when a people agree. But the moment they began, enemies rose. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem mocked, accused, and threatened. Their laughter echoed across the hills. Even a fox could break down their wall. Their motives were fear and insecurity. A rebuilt Jerusalem meant the end of their control. But Nehemiah refused to be moved. He prayed, stood firm, and declared, "The God of heaven will give us success." Sometimes silence in the face of mockery is the loudest victory. The work began, family by family, gate by gate, stone by stone. Priests, goldsmiths, merchants, fathers, and sons stood side by side. No one built alone. Everyone repaired the part in front of their own house. Unity became their greatest strength. But as the wall rose, so did the opposition. Enemies planned attacks. Fear spread. The workers grew tired. The rubble felt too heavy. So Nehemiah reorganized them, half building, half standing guard. Some carried tools in one hand and swords in the other. And he strengthened their hearts with these words, "Do not be afraid. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome." Their courage rose again. Then trouble erupted from within. The poor were suffering, exploited by wealthy Jews through loans and unfair interest. Nehemiah burned with righteous anger. He confronted the nobles publicly and commanded them to restore what they had taken. Rebuilding a city meant nothing if its people were broken. True leadership protects the vulnerable. As the work neared completion, the enemy tried a new tactic: distraction. They invited Nehemiah to meet far from the work. But he answered with legendary focus, "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down." When distraction failed, They attempted slander and false prophecy. But Nehemiah remained steady. Some attacks are designed to stop your assignment, not your life. And then, the miracle. After decades of ruin, after weeks of intense work and warfare, the wall was completed. Not in years. Not in months. In 52 days. When the surrounding nations saw it, they trembled. They knew this was the work of God. But Nehemiah knew the mission wasn't finished. Walls can stand, yet hearts remain broken. So he led the people into spiritual rebuilding. Ezra read the law aloud. The people listened, wept, repented, and renewed their covenant with God. And Nehemiah spoke life into them. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. They celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles with joy not seen since the time of Joshua. Worship filled the streets. The temple was restored. The priesthood purified. The people rededicated. The atmosphere of the city changed from despair to glory. Years later, Nehemiah returned from Persia and found new compromises: foreign marriages, neglected temple duties, profane Sabbaths. And once again, he confronted, corrected, purified, and restored. His leadership lasted beyond the project. He understood that rebuilding is not a moment, it is a lifelong commitment. Nehemiah began as a cupbearer, and ended as a nation rebuilder. He shows us that God does not look for perfect people, he looks for willing hearts. Hearts that cry over brokenness. Hearts that rise to build. Hearts that refuse distraction. Hearts that finish what God starts. And so I ask you today, what part of your life, your family, your destiny, your calling, your faith, is God asking you to rebuild? Rise. Pick up your stones. The God of heaven will help you succeed.